So first of all, thank you for having me.
Of course.
So today we're going to talk about essentially just building a system for speed. This is something it's taken a few years to develop, obviously, but it's something that is constantly growing, and it's a model, not a philosophy. So a model to me is something that you can continue to build on. A philosophy to me just seems something that's like more set in stone. So we're going to talk about today is the skill of speed. Okay, speed is a skill, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about how what strong enough is and how that can actually affect our skill development. Then the importance of speed in team sports, and then lastly, I'm going to talk about my model for strength and speed. So when it comes to sporting skills, we have the best example I like to think of is hockey and sprinters, and or hockey and running, and we know that they just don't go together very well. Um, I don't know how many of you work with hockey players, but if you've ever seen them sprint, it's not the prettiest thing, right? So this is where to show me kind of like how two skills can sometimes be deleterious to one another. Okay, and then the last example I can think of is my example of Michael Jordan. So this is kind of on twofold. So him obviously being a high level basketball player, and then going over to baseball and it didn't work out too well. And then conversely, I remember I was watching The Last Dance and he was talking about how he had issues. Um, he had issues when he went to baseball. He had to get his forearms ready. So he actually spent time like balling up newspapers, all right, and crunching newspapers in his hand, rolling them up, throwing it out. And that's kind of how he develops his forearm strength to get ready to hold the bat and whatnot. So I've given you guys two examples of in terms of like from a skill side. So the question now becomes is strength really a skill? And I would say it is. Simply for the fact that if you ask any of these power lifters, weight lifters that lift absorbent amounts of weight, they talk about technique and being able to sit in a groove. And it actually is a skill to be able to lift heavy loads at low velocities, which is why we see kids, younger athletes, lower training age, actually can't grind out weight at very low intensities, at low velocities, I apologize. So here are a couple of my older athletes, and these are around zero point 0.3, zero point 0.2, and zero point 0.3. So actually requires a great deal of skill to be able to grind it out at this kind of velocity. So really it comes down, is strength a skill? I think I've shown that to you. Yes, it is. So like any skill, what happens when you need to improve it? You have to do more, right? So if we take this example of training age and volume, as if we want to increase our strength, we have to increase the volume. It's just one of the ways it just works, right? So as we go from a novice to intermediate to advanced, we increase in our volume as our training age goes along. So why does this happen? Well, simply put, younger athletes need less training volume to stimulate physiological and performance adaptations. Experienced athletes, on the conversely, need more training volume to stimulate physiological and performance adaptations. So if we take it in terms of as humans, we have 100% training tolerance, right? As we're novices, as we get older, we have to increase the volume, yes. But if we do it in a parallel approach, right? So we'll see like, traditional or linear periodization. We can do that with novices because we're actually not going to, we can do a lot less to stimulate the physiological adaptations that we're looking for. So in this example, we see speed, sport, and strength actually split up evenly, right? And then if we continue that trend as we get more advanced in our training age, we can see we actually start leading to increasing over our training tolerance. And that leads to overtraining, injuries, and just nothing really good and maladaptation. So we know this is not the right way to do something. So now it comes down to what is strong enough. So we know from a skills perspective, we know that sprinting, kicking, and jumping do rely on strength. But the question becomes how much, right? And where it becomes really powerful is it actually helps in our development. So here's another model. If we can see as our training tolerance, we're actually under our training tolerance as our athletes increase in training age. And as you can see where our strength volume actually goes, not volume, our time spent training strength actually goes down as we get more advanced and we spend more time on the things that really matter, which are speed and the sporting practice. Now, this is where like block periodization and conjugated sequencing and things like that come into play. So if you can figure out what that strong enough is, then you can actually just stop wasting time, maintain that strength, slowly increase that strength, spend more time on what really matters, and improve sport mastery. So we know this is the correct way to do things. Now it comes to KPIs in sports. So KPIs in sports, so key performance indicators, generally relate around something that is strength-oriented, jump-oriented, and sprint-oriented. And how that is conveyed on the field, ice, or court is through either force, speed, or misdirection. So now that I kind of give you a little, insight into kind of the theory behind a lot of things, now I'm going to take you to part, I like to call it the matrix, right? And what this is, what we see is this is how we analyze our data, okay? So when it comes to analysis, this is, I get a lot of what I do from the transfer of training. So Anatoly Bondarchuk is, I think that's how you say his name. Again, a great throws coach back in the day, won medals as himself, as well as won medals for many of his athletes. And in reading this book, there's some key things that I've taken away. So transfer, when we talk about correlations, correlation coefficients, starts at about 0.349. And we know that from our university stats class, we know that's a relatively low correlation, but he found that to be something what he sees in his throwers. The next thing I took from it is, okay, when we have our exercise, so we test our exercise and our skill within the same microcycle. So if you're going to test your 40 on one day, you may test your squat on another day or your power exercise on another day, whatever it may be. You're going to want at least 10 data points, right? So you can actually run a decent correlation. Obviously, you want thousands of data points, but not all of us have access to thousands of data points, especially if you work in the private industry when people may not even be with you for that long. And then you want to make sure that your tests are reliable. So you want to make sure your tests are repeatable. And a lot of the tests that, come out, like, the Broncos speed test, they've been shown, there's a lot of research, a lot of literature that will show you that it is reliable. And you can actually run your own reliability tests. And then you want to perform the tests around the same time. So when it comes to same time, it means you actually want to, if you're running it in the AM, to keep doing it in the AM. If it's before practice, after practice. Obviously, sometimes things do happen, but you kind of want to do it at the same time. And recently, there's actually some literature I read around where it actually shows that athletes actually perform better in the PM opposed to the AM. So, we always hear about these 6 a.m. lifts. It's like you're not really getting the output that you possibly could get if you had done something later in the afternoon. But again, that all differs. So how do you figure this out now, right? So it comes down to, this is really a simple rudimentary example. You have your skill, you have your biomotor quality, and then you essentially test it at different segments, right? Really, really simple, and recommend you set your things up this way. And I'll show you an example how I can do things like this within my model. So now it comes down to just my personal journey. So my personal journey, like many strength coaches, started with just pure strength, right? Chasing 1RMs, thinking if I improve their bench press, they're going to improve their passing ability. If they improve their squat, they're going to improve their sprinting ability. If they can cruise their 1RM clean, is going to help with their tackling. Like really, really simple things I was looking at. And what I really came to find was that strength is not a very good, don't have a good relationship with skill development after a certain point. And even before, the relationship is pretty low. It's maybe like a 0.6, 0.7. So after I'd gone through strength and I realized that this is not the be all and end all, I moved to power. And this is where I started to see, okay, these things start to transfer a lot better to the skill development that I'm looking for. So I was looking at peak power, average velocity, um, peak velocity, things of that nature. And this is where I started to see, okay, we're starting to cook with some gasoline here. And then lastly, this is the thing that I'm on now is coordination. Coordination is so hard to actually like quantify. So as you can see in this picture here, she's actually wearing EMG. And I don't know if you know much about EMG, but it is really expensive. And on top of that too, is just like the reliability of it is pretty low as well. So you almost have to take it with a grain of salt. There's a lot of talk, cross talk, all these things are going on. But coordination is really, now I'm starting to understand, is it's a qualitative thing. And when I say that, it means it's like this, your coach's eye. How smooth do they look when they're running? Things like that. So now when it comes to strength, I did find a cutoff with my female rugby athletes. And what we found was about 1.25. If they can front squat about 1.25 times their body weight, that seems to be enough to transfer to their speed. So now we start focusing on other qualities such as power, right? And that's where we started seeing further increases when we stop chasing these numbers. So maintaining this kind of squat number is really, really easy, right? Once you get to it, by doing power work, you're actually going to increase your squat as well, right? Your strength, but it's going to increase at a slower rate than if you were to do a strength only program. Okay, now moving to power. So this paper here was a really, really good one for my personal development. And essentially what it was just, it was a comparison of, I think it was about 10 shot putters. And so they took the best athlete of the best shot putter and then compared them against the rest. So they knew like technique was not an issue. Like these guys were all efficient, great throwers, and some of them went on to be world record throwers. But what they found was there was a big discrepancy in the distance that they threw. So it was about 14%, right? And then when they started looking at like the strength ones, the strength qualities, it wasn't really that big of a difference. There is, I couldn't say from a 7% difference in a squat, it seems pretty big, but based off of how they kind of related in the paper, it didn't seem like it was that big of a deal. But where they started putting emphasis on was the fact of power. So when they started looking at the velocity of the bar when they did 20, 40, 60, and 80, and you can see as we get heavier, the differences in the velocity numbers was pretty substantial. And what they found was that strength had a low relationship with higher level throwers, and focusing on power seemed to be more important. So this is a big one for me, was like the mass of a shot is constant. Instead of moving more load, why not move the same load faster, right? How I relate this to sprinting is our weight is constant, our mass is constant. Where unless, you could lose weight, gain weight, whatever it may be, but for the most part, that is constant. So why are we not trying? And our whole goal is to get faster. So why are we trying to lift heavier loads to slow us down? All right, we want to be able to lift a certain load and move it faster. That we know we're increasing our power output. So this really got me on that power streamline. And then in terms of coordination, as I told you, so coordination is a bit of the Wild West, but coordination can help runners channel the trained muscle power correctly and to achieve the highest possible speed with the smallest possible loss in energy. With better coordination, you can economize your running style. And another goal of coordination is injury prevention. All right, and that becomes really important, right? Because the best ability is availability. So here, furthermore, for coordination now, is I look at, this is a great paper just to show the muscles active during a sprint gait. And as you can see, as they go from their stance phase to their swing phase, right, you can just see the different co-contractions, right, that are happening. And what's really interesting is this happens in about, maybe two to three tenths of a second. And you can see muscles are turning on and off really, really quick, like the snap of fingers, pop, 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 as we're running down. Then on top of that, you have limb disassociation, right? So you got one limb is obviously behind you, one limb's in front of you, right? So there's a lot of different things going on. And if we can actually increase that smoothness, we'll actually see increases in our running. So as I said, it is the Wild West, but through different drills, that's why we have our A's, our B's, our marches, things like that to help improve our athletes' coordination. So now I'm just going to pivot to kind of how do we do this. I've given you some theoretical underpinnings. All right, cool, but like really, as Kanye says, how, Sway, how? Okay, so it starts off with exercise pools. This is a great book. I recommend every strength coach read this if early in your development. Is The Tier System of Athletic-Based Strength Training by Joe Ken. His book was written, I want to say, early 2000s, and it stands the test of time. And other than showing you how to kind of structure a program in a large group setting, right, it shows he breaks down in terms of exercise pools. So what he did is he had about 10 exercises that he would constantly have. You have like 3 sets of 10 exercises. And as he moves different blocks, he would use those pools of exercises. So it really helped him with his strength training plan and his development. So he had like 150 guys he had to plan for, I apologize. So he had to develop some kind of way to, make this a lot more efficient. So then this brought me to my exercise pools. So in my strength template, my power template, I'll have our max effort days, our dynamic effort days. And then what we'll have is I'll always constantly have a single leg exercise, a front squat, and then a pull, some of pull. And what I've found is that these 3 categories generally have a relationship to speed development. All right. And what I'm finding more now is a lot of single leg exercises that actually have better relationships with speed. When it comes to single leg exercises, it's not single leg strength exercises, it's single leg power exercises. There's research to show that single leg strength doesn't have a good relationship. And I've even found in my own studies, right, that it's a really poor relationship. So power is a better indicator. So as you can see, I have the different phases, phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. And basically what I'll do is I'll constantly just rotate between these exercises. Moving on to our max velocity focus. So once I've kind of categorized athletes, if they need more acceleration or they need more max velocity, I'll put them in a bucket and then we'll go. And it's the same thing, a single leg power exercise, a squat, and a pull. And what I've actually found now is I've kind of moved away from max effort work once I figured out they're strong enough. And I actually just do 2 dynamic effort days in a week. And I found like a lot better results with my athletes. So now the big thing is training is testing and testing is training. These things are not mutually exclusive. So we're constantly measuring outputs. The same way we measure outputs in the gym, I measure outputs on the field, right? So in that way, we can marry things together through exercise pools. So with acceleration, I have 3 different exercises, right? So we measure 0 to 10, 0 to 15, 0 to 20 that we constantly rotate through. And then for our max speed, here we go. We have 7 different exercises now, right? So these are different things that I'll actually measure. And then what I'm constantly able to do now is keep athletes fresh, keep athletes, dopamine levels high because they're constantly being stimulated each week, every 2 weeks or whatever it may be with new exercises. And then on top of that, they also have things that they can break PRs with, right? Which becomes really important. If we just, put them down and constantly run 40s all the time, right, it's going to get very, very boring after a while, especially if we're in certain phases and they may not see results. It gets really hard on an athlete, and you can, again, lower their dopamine levels, and those are things that we do not want to do. So really and truly comes down to marrying our exercises, and that's how we do it. So we can run our correlations and our transfers of training calculations. So now the question becomes, so when do we do this? For me, I do this about 11 out of the 12 months of the year. I'm a firm believer, if you stay in the high intensity zone as well as low intensity zone for recovery, you'll increase your outputs, right? That medium intensity, the stuff, that junk in the middle, that's the stuff you do, the repeat sprints, those glycolytic exercises, whatnot. You do those kind of leading up to competition, right? To get them prepared. What we do know is if you do too much of that medium intensity work, right, that will actually have an effect on our high intensity outputs. And the big thing being is we understand how important speed is. And if we spend too much time doing the medium, we're never going to get our high intensity outputs. On top of that, too, is that medium intensity work, that stuff dies off about, you stop adapting after about 6 weeks or so. So now it comes down to just putting it all together. So again, another great book that I love, and I constantly go back. I try to read this probably about twice a year. Is The Science and Practice of Strength Training, and I'm pretty sure actually a new edition just came out, so I got to get my hands on that. So, anyways, so 3 calculations that I take from them are correlation coefficient, result gain, and then transfer of training. So I constantly use these 3 calculations to kind of help put my exercise pools together. So I have my speed, I have my weight room. Now, I talked a lot about speed, but it actually could be whatever biodynamic qualities you're looking for. Kicking distance. You can actually measure. You can measure output in a tackle. You can do that through force gauges. But it could be anything you want. But it's really, you have to set up your intervention in a way that you can measure it properly. And then that's how you get informed decisions on your training. So last thing, just some take homes. Some skills do not mix well. Some skills can be, oil and water. That's what absolutely we do not want. Figuring out how strong someone needs to be, do that, and then move on. Strength's cool. And I think we're seeing it now, but as strength coaches, we need to move away from, I have, my 300-pound clean club and things like that, and actually figure out how are we making a difference on the field of play. And with team sports being so difficult to actually determine if you're making an impactful difference, what we can say is your athletes, again, if they're injury-free, obviously, right? If they're faster, right, that usually tends to make a difference in team sports. So figure that out and then move on. And develop a system. You need to have some kind of system so you can test and retest, and then just to see if you can make a difference. And then lastly, testing is training and training is testing. Remember, everything you're doing is you are measuring it. I like to think of it, I like to call myself like a mad scientist, because I'm constantly trying to get the best out of my athletes. We're constantly trying to come up with new methods. And I do that by analysis of my own training. And I think analysis of your own training can become rather difficult if you're not seeing improvements like you want. And it can become very humbling. And then you have to really start looking yourself in the mirror and figuring out, hey, why the hell are my athletes not getting better? So that concludes the presentation for me. Instagram, Twitter, email. Thank you again.